Here's something to ponder. The state of New South Wales up to 1840s extended in size from Cape York Peninsula down to and including Port Melbourne. Yes, Moreton Bay in current Queensland was established as a penal settlement, and Melbourne was an established town on the banks of the Yarra, and incidentally building its own following, loyalty and colony chest-thumping pride. I'm Michael Bischel, Australian historical fiction writer, and it pays to remember just how big the colony of New South Wales was. It actually extended from the centre of Australia to Fiji on an east-west basis, huge. The times were changing though. Populations were growing around Moreton Bay and in and around Melbourne to justify, or rather to even consider first, the separation of powers into two and perhaps then to three colonies hugging the east coast of Australia. Planning for or considering the splitting of two colonies started around 1836. So it wasn't when on the 30th of March 1846 Governor Gipps asked the Legislative or the Executive Council whether they recommended the separation of Port Phillip from the rest of New South Wales. Bishop Broughton was against it. Nothing strange about that. Gipps, the Governor, gave the casting vote in favour of separation. Looking towards the future, London proposed to create two distinct houses to replace existing legislation, New South Wales. The Legislative Council, that is, not for franchise representation, but there was discussion about a House of Assembly representing the people, not so much the wealthy. Each colony would have necessary regulation to undertake such things as the imposition of duties, an export, conveyance of letters, formation of roads, railways or other internal communications traversing two or more colonies. Now, to put this plan into action was to create a central authority system of representational legislation throughout the whole of Australia, including Van Diemen's Land, modern Tasmania, South Australia and Western Australia. Earl Grey, he was the Minister or Secretary of State for Colonies back in England, he concluded that this by asking Governor Fitzroy to seek the opinions of the local authorities for these proposals. Now, I guess the result would have been pretty obvious, but when the inhabitants of Port Phillip heard about the district was to become a separate colony, they were overjoyed, enthusiastic, beauty, fantastic, because they had never been given the vaunted name Victoria, and they felt that they had the moral superiority over their northern colony of New South Wales, which after all started as a penal colony. And Melbourne didn't have the stain of convict initiation. And they were not impressed with Bishop Broughton's opposition. Adelaide welcomed the proposed legislational separation, but not of the representative government. Perth made no comment at all, for they wanted convict labour rather than their birthrights of Englishmen. So on the 30th of August 1850, Earl Grey wrote to Governor Fitzroy that the Act had at last received the royal assent on 5th of August. According to the report of the Select Committee of Trades and Plantations, the Governor and Legislative Council of New South Wales were to determine the number of members of the Legislative Councils of both New South Wales and Victoria, provided 1/3 was appointed by Her Majesty and 2/3 elected by the inhabitants of each colony. The Governor and Council of New South Wales was to divide both colonies into suitable electoral districts. Now, here comes the crunch. The qualifications for voting was a man, sorry ladies, it wasn't to be a while before you got the vote, be 21 years of age, natural born or naturalised subject of Her Majesty, and that he had to have freehold estate worth £100 situated within the district for which the vote was to be given, or to be the occupant of a dwelling house of the clear annual value of £10 per annum. So therein lies the historic fact of the separation of New South Wales into two colonies. Queensland was to follow in later years, and the other colonies. So the evolution of the land mass of Australia was now starting to mature into a Commonwealth of colonies under the auspices and parentage of England. I'm Michael Bishop. I'm signing off now. Thank you very much for joining. Please watch out though for the next videos. Thank you and goodbye.